back with the Tattoo Improvement Network, welcoming you to another episode of Fireside Technique. I'm going to start this episode off with a question. If I were to give you, say, like an 8B pencil, a pencil that's capable of being very dark, nearly black, and I asked you to render an apple in grayscale, could you do it, or would it have to be all black and paper tone? Of course you could do it. You could vary the pressure and get all sorts of grays, right? So that's going to be my first point in black shading for color tattoos. We talk a lot about gray shading. Whenever I'm doing black shading or shading for color tattoos, I'm really only using black. Very rarely am I dipping into grays. I'm varying my pressure and I'm getting some grays, but I'm not using a lot of gray washes. And I'll get into the why as we move on through this. So this is a larger tattoo, and this is typically when I use black shading instead of just going directly into color. If I were doing a one sitting or one shot tattoo, I'd probably do all this kind of at the same time. I would start building some blacks, and then I would build color right off of those blacks. But when I'm thinking about large pieces, and this is a full sleeve that I'm working on right here, I'm really thinking more abstractly and from a compositional standpoint at this phase. I'm trying to think of where my large masses of dark are and where my large masses of light are. Also, I am not really concerned with getting a full saturation of these blacks. If you'll notice the way that I'm moving the machine and look closely at the ink as it's going in, it's not really that saturated. And the reason being is I know that I'm going to come back and lay color directly on a lot of this, and I'm going to be able to tint it either warmer or cooler depending on what I need for that part of the tattoo. So basically, what I'm thinking of at this phase is, where is my light coming from? What is the form that I'm trying to describe? And where would the light be hitting it? If you look right here, it looks like I'm kind of sketching off to the side. I'm starting to describe that form. This is kind of this is like a meteor or an asteroid that Supergirl is sitting on here, and it's being lit from the bottom with a fiery kind of explosion from the bottom. So in order for that fiery explosion at the bottom to read as bright and full of light, I need some strong contrast in that area. So to serve that purpose, this asteroid is going to be fairly dark. And you can see that I'm kind of making those decisions now. I'm thinking about what the asteroid actually looks like. It's kind of jagged. And I'm not trying to overly render it. I'm really just going from dark to skin tone. The reason being, if I were to start to render with medium grays over and into my light areas, when I went to lay color into those areas, I'm going to muddy it up. It's going to end up a little murky. And nowadays there are so many color choices that you have all of these rich muted tones. You don't really need to have a gray lying underneath those tones. If you need, say, a muted mid-tone blue, well, they make one. And if you don't want to use a pre-mixed one, you can take a blue and dip it into a little bit of orange and kind of and mute it down in a much cleaner way than just laying a gray wash under it and then laying a blue on top of it. It's always going to look a little murky that way. You're served a lot better by mixing a color in with its complementary or in with another color and creating those off hues rather than just laying it directly over gray. Okay, now down in this area, this is where my light is coming from. So you see how I'm kind of whipping right here, kind of whipping the machine around. I don't want that quite as dark as I want some of these areas further up in the asteroid. So I'm kind of I'm varying my pressure a little bit, staying a little bit lighter, and just enough to describe the form, just going in enough to describe the form. Here is, you can kind of see, it's not super clean. It's really kind of peppery. It's a little sketchy. It looks like someone that doesn't know what they're doing is putting a tattoo in, but that's all right. It's really an underpainting. I'm thinking of this as an underpainting first. I know that I'm going to build directly on top of it when it heals, and I'm going to blend. I'm going to fully saturate those darks, and where the transitions take place, where the form turns, where those edges come in. I'm going to saturate those edges with different colors, different values that turn the form the way that I want it to be turned. So right now, I'm just trying to describe the most basic shape. If you look right here, I'm starting to define, or I'm starting to just soften edges a little bit. While I do just want to define the basic shape, I don't want those blacks to come to a really abrupt halt where they look like a line. At least not everywhere. There are some areas that may happen. But I'll kind of lighten up my pressure just a little bit, and I'll kind of whip through and just enough to kind of soften the edge of where that form turns. Not too much, just enough. Another example of how I just slowly am building this up with light passes. I don't want it to get too dark. I just want to kind of describe the form. I want to get it in, and as quickly as possible. I don't want to sit and make pass after pass, but I do have a few. If you're paying attention to the skin, you'll notice that you can bump back through areas here and there. You just kind of have to learn to read the skin and make sure that you're not overworking it in any way. I usually wouldn't go into details like these little pops that I'm working on right there, like little rocks or something like that. But my gray wash lines were so light and there weren't enough of them, so I kind of am inventing some of these little guys as we go. And so they'll, like I said, normally I wouldn't go quite this far with rendering in these early phases. Now I am kind of bumping against some edges and trying to sharpen up. I want that little streak of light to be nice and crisp and clean. So I am going in with a smaller mag. That's probably a 5 mag right there, and just kind of defining an edge so that I'll have a fairly clean edge to come back against with a light tone. And that's not to say that I can't come back with a liner. Most likely I will at the end of the tattoo and push those edges super crisp just where I want them. But I would rather start more general and then work up to those crisp edges. This is kind of fun because it almost gives you an excuse to be like a scratcher. Like you feel like you're working out of your kitchen, you're sketching, you're kind of blocking in stuff, kind of roughly and crudely, it's like drawing a picture. It's not like you're really trying to get these perfectly smooth blends or render perfectly or get this gray to fall seamlessly into this gray. You're really just trying to describe the most basic forms and get them in there with enough information that when they heal, you know what you're looking for, and you know what to do on top of them. Now, as we move up in this tattoo, you'll notice that these areas that I've started shading up in this figure in the background are a little lighter. And the reason is although he's a large figure, he is sitting in the background. He's sitting behind that asteroid. So since I have some fairly saturated darks in that asteroid and it's in the immediate foreground, I don't want my background figure to get as dark as that. If he is as dark, he's going to want to jump forward and compete with that foreground asteroid. I want him to be a little softer, a little more in the background. Another reason that I'm keeping him a little lighter is that in planning this sleeve, I know that I'm dealing with a tribal cover-up at the top of his arm. So there's an area of dark that's going to have to be pretty deep and saturated at the top of his arm, which is why I made the asteroid at the bottom of his arm dark, so that I've almost bookended the piece with darks. And then this figure in the middle, this Bizarro Superman that's in the middle, will be light. So and he's also oversized. So he'll be kind of a focal point. He's kind of what I want you to see when you first look at the piece, because he's going to be the large light shape in the center. Now, I do have to give him enough value to describe the form, but I don't want him to end up too dark. Now, it looks a little sketchy right now, but keep in mind this is still straight black. So if you look at the say the stuff that I'm working on right there, like the underside of his leg, and you compare it to the darks in the asteroid below it, it's probably 3 or 4 shades lighter at least. And it's not because I moved to a gray. It's because I changed my technique. I'm just scraping the skin. I'm moving a little quicker. I'm kind of getting through an area and moving away and letting it settle, and then seeing how smooth my transitions are. And like I said, I'm not worried with them being completely smooth. I don't want them to look raked or really, inconsistent, because that's going to make it more difficult on me whenever I go to lay my solid color in on top of it. So I want as much consistency as I can get, but I'm not going to sit there and make tiny little circles and get a perfect medium gray. It doesn't matter. Right? It would be a waste of my time and the client's money. I can get it just as saturated and just as smooth as I need with these kind of brush marks. Which brings me to another point. Learn to make your machine work for you. If you're constantly having to change the way that you move your hands to satisfy the machine, you'll struggle with these kinds of things indefinitely. So if your machine isn't working the way that you like to work, change machines, learn to tune the thing, send it off to someone, get in contact with a builder that can build something that's willing to work with you and get it tuned to run the way that you'd like for it to run. I see so many people that draw a certain way and end up having to tattoo, or end up tattooing a completely different way because they're a slave to their machine. And it just shouldn't be that way. If the machine isn't operating the way that you naturally make marks, then correct the machine. Don't change your marks. All right, still just kind of blocking in these very basic shapes. I'm trying to describe where my light is, where my light's coming from. These gray lines that are laid in on this guy, I had to line this entire sleeve at once, so I ended up gray lining the entire thing. I've kind of gotten away from that as much as I can. I like to just shade. Those gray lines still kind of come through from time to time. So here we go. See, just kind of scraped in marks, gets a little more saturated. None of it is fully saturated. Just thinking basic shapes, lights and darks, and not a lot of mediums. And that's it. That'll heal up, and I will come back next time and lay color on top of it. I hope that helped. Thank you, guys.